Although I think what people place right and running with B is a great icebreaker question.
What? What we found here?
All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this March 27th special meeting of the school committee, I think it's a personnel committee of the whole, to order. Dr. Curley, will you call the roll?
Dr. Ackman.
Present.
Mayor Ballantyne.
Present.
Mayor Ballantyne. Ms. Patone.
Here.
Dr. Phillips.
Present.
Ms. Dion.
Present.
Ms. Barish.
Present.
President Ewan-Campen.
Here.
Ms. Krepshin.
Here.
Mr. Green.
I'm here.
We have a quorum.
Fantastic. So before I get started, I just wanted to state that Mayor Ballantyne will be joining us. She's currently at another meeting, and as soon as that is over, she'll be joining us. So we have one item before us today, which is the interview Dr. Michelle Madera to be Superintendent of Schools of Somerville. So just going to real quick run this how this is going to go, and we'll jump right into it. So you'll be allowed to start off with an opening statement, and then each of the members of the committee will ask at least one question in a preselected category. And once that round is complete, we'll give members the opportunity to ask questions on whatever strikes their fancy in alternating rounds until our questions are exhausted and you're free to go.
Okay.
And with that, if there are any questions, you may begin your opening statement.
Okay. Thank you. So hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Dr. Michelle Madera. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very honored and excited for this opportunity to apply and be considered for superintendent of the Somerville Public Schools. A little bit about myself. I've been an educator for over 3 decades, have experience in elementary, middle, high school, also district administrator. I was ELL director for 11 years in the Cambridge Public Schools, and the past 4 years I have been an assistant superintendent. 1 year as the head of curriculum and instruction, and the past 3 years I've been in charge of supporting schools and principals in the elementary schools. There are 11 elementary schools in Cambridge. I also am highly involved in supporting ELA from JK to 12, social studies, JK to 12, Title I, and I've been working collaboratively with the City of Cambridge on the development and implementation of a universal pre-K program. In the Cambridge Public Schools, we have various programs. There are dual language programs, Montessori, ESL, SEI programs. We have families represented in 75 language groups. And so it's been a wonderful experience in Cambridge, working with diverse families. And I decided to apply to the Somerville Public Schools because the community, it felt like a calling to me. I identify extremely well with the diversity in the Somerville Public Schools and the work that you are doing to enhance diversity, achievement, and excellence. And I feel like I have lots of skills and experiences that I can bring to help further that mission. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask the first 2 questions. The first one is a logistics question, then we'll come into question about your core values. So the logistics question is, if you were to be selected to be our superintendent, would you be available to start on July 1st? If not, when would you be able to start, and what would your plan be for that period?
Sure. So yes, when I applied, I understood that July 1st was the expectation. And so, yes, I would begin on July 1st. What would my plan be beginning in July? I would start to have listening sessions, listening groups with different constituents and stakeholders that are not limited to, this is not an exhaustive list, but parents, teachers, administrators, students, community members. I'm very interested in the SMILE program as well. I know that I was able to tour today, but that wasn't there wasn't enough time to in that. I would also like to meet with the mayor to understand how her priorities align with the priorities of the Somerville Public Schools. And I also would like to meet with school committee members as well so that I can understand more about, I know that you've divided up different tasks amongst yourselves and just kind of learn what the experience has been, what achievements have taken place, and what are some of the things that are still pending so that I can understand and start to plan my role in supporting and moving forward with initiatives and goals for.
Okay, seeing no follow-ups, my next question is about your core values. Namely, can you name some of your core values, and can you tell a time when you have had to lean on those core values to lead through controversy?
Absolutely. If you speak to anyone who knows me in education and has worked with me, they will tell you I put children first. So my highest core value is ensuring that every decision that I make, whether it's popular or not, is made in the best interest of our scholars. There are many times when I've had to work. Well, I'll give you the list of my core values first before I go into the example. So my core value is excellence, high achievement, caring, being supportive and strong, advocacy, equity, most importantly, inclusion and belonging. Those are the core values from which I operate in every aspect of my life, not just professionally, but personally as well. I approach everything with purpose and systemic thinking and inclusivity. I understand that I am not the smartest person in the room all the time. Sometimes I am. A lot of times I'm not. And so it is important to collaborate with others and really listen to understand and to hear and to learn, not just to respond. So that's pretty much my terms of decision making. I've made decisions about curriculum in the Cambridge Public Schools that perhaps weren't popular. I aligned curriculum rollout for kindergarten across the city of Cambridge, and that was at the time seen as not so popular. There wasn't alignment. But when we think about equity and what that means, it means that we should not be able to tell what schools a child came from when they enter the high school. We should not be able to say, well, we can see that this child came from this particular school. That is not equity. That is not okay. It doesn't align with my core values. I wanted to make sure that all children had a fair and high quality beginning entry to school. And so there is alignment with the curriculum that was selected. The curriculum selected is research-based and proven. And so we did a slow rollout of it and built on it every year as it made sense and aligned it with professional development and learning just before each unit was rolled out and expected to be implemented. Now, that was not popular. But it's equitable. It is what's best for children. And if at the end of the road that is not the curriculum that is the thing, then we will stop it and move on and do something that is also research-based, proven and true, and try that. It's my practice to try to dismantle practices that have proven to not benefit students. And so Sometimes that's unpopular, and I'm okay with that.
So I'm going to go Ms. Patone, then Mr.
Through you, Chair Green. You gave the example of the kindergarten curriculum. Can you share a little bit about your philosophy towards early childhood education, as well as the thoughts on how autonomy for educators plays in a space where you're rolling out a district-wide curriculum?
Sure. My philosophy for early childhood education is that it needs to be joyful. Children need to play, but they also have to learn, and it has to be purposeful. We have to incorporate standards in play, in the daily centers and the work that takes place as well, so that we are not teaching only social skills, but we're also helping students learn, how to be learners, how to access scaffolds that are in the room, how to sound words. Phonics is very important. That was another achievement that I had in Cambridge. Every single school in Cambridge now has a phonics curriculum that is used. That wasn't always the case prior to my tenure as assistant superintendent. So my philosophy is that it's got to be joyful. It should be diverse, because we learn from each other. We learn from our similarities and our differences. I believe in fostering independence, gradual release of responsibility, so that our children can then thrive. And we want to make sure that we foster children that are able to handle being in school, but do it in a loving and supportive way. You know, personal, what is it, I'm losing my words right now, but a little productive struggle is a good thing. That doesn't mean ignore a child who's struggling. It just means don't hold the pencil for them all the time, and allow them to ask for help when they need it. Teach them advocacy skills, and teach them to help and love each other.
Ms. Dion.
How did you go about getting educator and caregiver input during every step of your rollout of the kindergarten curriculum?
Yeah, so that was difficult to do with the K curriculum. When I came into the role, the K curriculum had been already in the district for about 7 years, and out of the 12 schools, only 4 implemented it. And when I asked why, pretty much the general response was, we were not told we had to do it. At that point, I realized that rather than bring in something new, we would roll with what was present, because it's a strong curriculum. It's an excellent curriculum. It was researched. We ran it through ed reports and all kinds of checks and balances for it. And what I did was I started off slow. I took the curriculum and I said, well, what are the things that already happen in a classroom? They already have centers. They already do read alouds. They have the sand tables. And this is what was happening, only it wasn't aligned to a curriculum that was across the board in Cambridge. And so the slow rollout incorporated, well, these are the things that you are already doing, and now what we want you to do is do them with the objectives and the learning goals and the purpose outlined in the curriculum. We, for each unit, made sure that we purchased all of the books. Many of the books are available in digital form, and so actually there was this misconception that you have to have the physical book in your hand to do a read aloud. In actuality, the smart board worked much better, because when you read a book and you just show it, the kids really cannot see all of it. And so having it displayed on the smart board actually gave children access that they had not had before. And so in the beginning of each unit, I had trainers come in, and we slowly built the capacity of the educators with the curriculum. Additionally, as the year progressed, I surveyed all the kindergarten teachers and had them identify to add to the curriculum as we rolled it out. So every term, I call it a term or so, we were adding something, different strategies, and we've now come full circle a year and a half later where they have had exposure to the curriculum, been surveyed about it twice, 2 or 3 times now, and have implemented the steps needed. There is still this rumor, so to speak, that the curriculum will go away. I really pray that that's not true, regardless of tonight's outcome. You're welcome.
Dr. Ackman?
My topic is special education. Where is the future of special education going? And what role do students play in it?
It's a great question. I can answer where I hope the future of special education is going. I really would love for it to be more inclusive. I believe in the least restrictive environment for our special ed students. Opportunities to integrate with their gen ed peers and learn from them, and have our gen ed peers learn from our students as well. Oftentimes we try to change the student rather than change the environment that they're in. And I think that we really need to take a look at that. What is it that we are doing to educate the rest of the world around uniqueness, around unique needs and differences in learning? So I'm hoping that's the direction in which special ed will head, is in educating the general ed populations around us. I do believe in universal design for learning. I teach that as well. We want to make sure that we provide access points for everyone that needs it and we all benefit from. I think a little more. It's been a really long day. Future of it. I would love for every educator to be well-versed in accommodations, in understanding learning nuances, and in strategizing in the classroom and differentiating for different learners. That's really, really important to me, and not a situation where people may believe that someone with a uniqueness belongs somewhere else. You're welcome.
Ms. Crumption?
What is the best role of the superintendent in collective bargaining? What are your experiences at the bargaining table? How would you propose that we use the bargaining process to promote student achievement?
Yes. So I answered this question during my first interview with y'all, and I did admit that my experience is within the last 3 to 4 years. I have been at the strategy side, but I've also been at the bargaining table as well. What is the best role? In terms of bargaining, I think it's really important to pull the union in to helping us come up with solutions, and not just being in situations where it's controversial or the arguing back and forth. I think it's important that we really hone in on what is it that educators need. Is it professional learning? Is it supports, because we have to support our adults that support our children. That's important. But we can't leave the student out of the conversation when engaged in bargaining. Our scholars are our customers, and it's really important that we try to leverage the educators that are on bargaining teams and on the union, so that they can help become part of the solution in trying to find innovative ways to address opportunity important. So I wonder about that. I would love to see teaming where we are talking about and planning for academic and social emotional improvements for our students, while at the same time understanding that we have to take care of our educators as well.
I actually have a follow-up. Namely, given, let's take it for granted that if a superintendent and a union president are always agreeing someone's not doing, at least one person isn't doing their job, and I recognize that that Cambridge just recently had a fairly contentious labor discussion.
Correct.
Which happens, as we've certainly had those here in Somerville. But if we would ask the union president about your role in union labor negotiations, what do you think they would say?
I'm not so sure that I do say a lot more behind closed doors than I do publicly around issues related to teacher evaluations, related to student achievement, related to professional learning. Those are areas that I speak very strongly about. They would not say that I've had contentious negotiating moments with them at the table, but I think that people have come to me and have said, we know that you're discussing this particular topic. We would love it if you could ensure that it doesn't get lost in conversations. And that's the extent of it. I don't go deeply into anything related to bargaining because we have to be sure that we don't compromise the process. We might not like the process, but we have to trust it. And at the end of it, come out with something that we all can live with and that is beneficial to all parties involved.
Dr. Phillips?
How do you define equity, and how have you applied the concept to improve student outcomes?
Absolutely. I define equity as ensuring that we are consistently dismantling systems of oppression, systems that create barriers for students who traditionally have been furthest away from educational justice. That's what we must do. Equity does not mean equal. It means that everyone receives the supports and the resources that they need in order to achieve and be their best. Unfortunately, sometimes that feels like someone may be losing something, and it could be something that they absolutely don't need. It might be a fear. Change is fearful, even when it's good change. It's scary, and there's always a sense of loss. But if we're going to look at equity in its real and true purpose, then we are looking at student results, we're looking at outcomes, we're weighing data, and we're responding to it with research-based practices, and not just what is comfortable to us. And so equity is a catchphrase that is used often. It's popular, it feels good, but I've also seen it leveraged in ways that are self-serving and not necessarily beneficial to those that it's supposed to serve. And so I believe in gently educating folks around me and calling it out and saying, You know, that really isn't an equity issue. This is the equity issue, and this is what it looks like. And if we're really going to call equity, then we really need to work our hardest to ensure that's what they need, regardless of their income, their social status, their social capital, their zip code. Every child needs something. It doesn't matter what kind of family background they're coming from. Every child needs something. And so we just have to figure out what is the something that the children need and make those shifts and those pivots, be creative, and really lead with heart to ensure that they're receiving what they need to be their very best in school. We want equitable outcomes. Equity isn't just the aesthetics of a school and what you see, although that is important, as well as books that are representative. But it's our actions, it's our systems, it's our curriculum, it's everything. It's the air that we breathe in schools. Yes.
I'm going to go with Dr. Ackman, then back to Dr. Phillips. Follow-ups? Okay.
Thank you. So you mentioned sort of people using equity in various ways, and that you have, challenged that without naming names. Can you speak to an experience and sort of how that played out?
Sure. I could speak to, I have quite a few examples where people will say things to me like, I'm trying to pick the right one because I am being televised. Bless you. So in my circles, I often hear things like, we need to fundraise for children who obviously can't afford to go on a particular field trip. That's an equity issue. That's the quote. And I will push back with love and say, well, what do you mean? And how do you know that a particular group of children would be the recipients of that fundraising? And it sometimes helps people kind of reflect on what was said and what they're saying, especially when it's being said like in an email blast to everyone. I ask questions. I push back by asking the questions that are reflective, help them reflect. And most people, I would say, get it and they understand and they self-correct. And unfortunately, some don't. That's one example where equity is leveraged. Or someone will say something like, well, we don't have books for everyone in the classroom. That's an equity issue. And so I ask, in a well-resourced community, there are so many books and so many ways. I mean, we project things on smart boards. We have so much technology, one-to-one devices for our children. And so I get confused oftentimes when someone uses the term, that's an equity issue. I have to really sometimes stop and think about it and wonder, how much do they really understand what equity means when we have so many resources that everyone has access to? For me, equity sometimes isn't the resources, it's how we use them. And that's more important to me than the amount. It's how we use it, and are we really aligning books, interventions to the needs of students that like everyone, for example, here's another and last. There was a time when everyone was asking to have Lexia licenses for everyone in Cambridge. Well, not every child needs Lexia. Lexia is wonderful, I have nothing against it. But is it being used? Is it being used?
Who might not know, be familiar with Lexia, or for people at home, can you say what Lexia is?
Oh, I'm sorry. Lexia is an intervention for reading. It's a computer-based program. Thank you. And there was a huge advocacy to spend an enormous amount of money to ensure that every child had access to Lexia. It's expensive. It's effective for those who need it. And so that was identified as an equity issue, ensuring that every child had a license when not every child needed it.
Thanks. Thinking about your years in Cambridge, what would you say was your biggest accomplishment relative to making the district operate more equitably?
Oh, there's a few accomplishments, but my biggest, I believe, was when I was the director of ELLs. I think at the time they were called English Learner Programs. Now they're multilingual programs. The biggest accomplishment was ensuring and working with teachers to use data to inform their instructional practices, aligning with the needs of students, ensuring that we were really looking at growth and aligning professional development to the needs. And our children, our scholars, our English learners in Cambridge currently and for the longest time have outperformed English learners across the state in terms of acquiring English. We have a phenomenal team of teachers there who really bought in to data, to sharing best practices together, and to receiving professional development and really applying it across the board in their instruction. And so our English learners learn English quite quickly, and that is a sense of, I have a sense of pride over that. Thank you.
All right, I have one more follow-up, and then it's actually my turn again. And actually, the two questions are almost linked. So the follow-up is, you've talked a lot about equity being getting students what they need, recognizing that different students need different things. The question then becomes, who decides and how do we decide what it is that a student needs?
Absolutely, the data decides. If you're screening, if you're doing screeners, if you're looking at formative assessments as well as summative assessments, the data itself will tell you a story of what it is that students need. And if you analyze it well and you pay attention to your the areas in which the district has experienced growth, and you look at what have been the practices, then you know you could to continue that. And then if you look at the data, and the data is evident that we need, for example, phonics, or if we need reading comprehension, or we need computation, or numeracy, whatever it is, writing, then we need to respond to that data. I don't think it's a who, I think it's a what decides, and the data does tell a very, very clear story. So data competency for me is very, very important.
All right, and to that end, my next question is, in a district where as many as half the students may come from homes where English isn't the first language, and those homes may or may not be represented with political power or being voter roles, how do we ensure those families and those communities feel a sense of ownership of both their child education and SPS as a whole?
Yeah. So I can relate to that on both a personal and professional level, understanding that language acquisition is not an easy thing, and also understanding the nuances of culture. Many cultures, they view the educator and the school as the experts on learning for their child. We need to ensure that we provide opportunities, outreach, meet with people, in the communities. They need to see role models. They need to see people that have achieved. And we need to talk to them. We oftentimes expect them to come to us. We need to go to them and provide access points, Zoom calls, community meetings, opportunities for them to speak to people in their language that represent the school. We do need to do that. We need to open up and foster a culture of belonging so that there is that ability to reach out and participate in different ways. I look forward, if I'm the candidate that is selected, I look forward to connecting with those families on a larger scale and utilizing language that is understood and opening up opportunities for them to be able to come and learn how to ask the right questions. I've done that in Cambridge as well, where parents have been provided with information. We use a lot of acronyms in education that they don't understand, and just kind of helping them understand that in this culture, there is a need for advocacy and presence, and arming them with the right questions to ask at a parent-teacher meeting, during a text communication or class dojo, or whatever is used, right? There we use a lot of different ways to communicate with parents. In Cambridge, we've introduced this platform called Parent Square. It is a platform where you can email, you can send video, you can send text, phone calls as well, and you record them in English, and you send them out, and it automatically translates into the home language. Parents are able to respond in their home language, and we receive it in English. And so there's lots of technology. All you got to do is, really research it, look at it, interview districts that have used it, understand what are the pros and cons of it, and then give it a shot. And it helps bridge the home-school connection across cultures and across languages.
Ms. Patel?
Thank you. My question is about leadership style.
Excuse me. I was hoping I wouldn't cough today, but had to get that one out.
Can you share an example of a problem that you solved or an improvement that you were part of that demonstrates what your leadership style is?
A problem that I've solved. I solved many problems throughout the day. I need to think about that demonstrates my leadership style. Okay, yes, I have one now. Just these past few months, we meaning the Cambridge Public Schools, we have been working on what is the instructional model. The instructional model was outsourced to a company to come and help us go through what I know to be a design process. That was a little upsetting for some educators who engaged in some practices that had already been done prior to COVID and with the previous superintendent. And so after COVID, we got a new superintendent, a new cabinet or executive leadership team. And some of the things that had happened prior to that, people they weren't aware, and that's normal. However, there was a sense of dissatisfaction around the fact that they felt that no one asked what had we done previously. And so I was asked by my chief of academics and schools to intervene in a sense and speak to a group, our instructional coordinators group, to get a sense of what is it that went wrong. And the reason they sent me was because I've been in the district for a long time. I have excellent relationships with people. I work well with people. And even when I'm not agreed with, I'm trusted enough to move forward anyway. And so I found out that the issue was that the past wasn't being acknowledged with the present, and there was some repetitiveness in what was going on. And so the strategy moving forward was to, A, acknowledge that that took place. That took place, that was real. And secondly, do a cross-section, allow everyone time to do a cross-section between what was in the past and what was newly brought forward with the consultants. Understanding that we may not have liked the process, but the product that was arrived at was very valuable. And looking at how it interwove and connected, and then deciding, does this product still represent what we would like to see as our instructional model, and does it contain our core values? And how, and if not, how can we ensure that it does? And also be able to flex and say, thank you to the consultants, thank you for the process, we've got it from here.
Ms. Dion.
Through you, Chair, I've spoke with some folks in Cambridge, and maybe this is what we're referring to. They did have some concerns about your leadership style. They described it as top down and my way or the highway. Moving forward, are you willing to consider educator feedback more so and move towards a more collaborative and distributive style of leadership?
Yeah, so I would start by saying that I disagree. I'm not top down in my way or the highway, although there are times when that is, it's needed to be strong. You're needed for students. I listen, and I do honor opinions and feedback. Sometimes people will say that about you when the answer is no, even after you've listened. Sometimes the answer is no, we do need to move forward because this is what's in the best interest of students. And when that requires folks to pivot and change from what they're accustomed to, there is unhappiness about that. And that is the process. I don't think that I would be successful if I said yes to everything and just allowed status quo to continue when students are not making progress. And so, yes, there are times when I do dig my heels in and say, this is what we're doing. We are going to implement a kindergarten curriculum consistent across the district. And I've asked the question for those that opposed it, what are you losing? What are you giving up? What curriculum are we giving up in order to implement that? And there wasn't a satisfactory answer to what you're giving up. And is it working? Are you being asked to give up something that's working well for students? And if the answer is silence or no, then yes, we are going to do what's needed because that's my role, that's my job. It's to be unpopular when it's required to be unpopular for students. Somebody has to stick their neck out for them. And thank you for the question. I appreciate being able to answer it honestly.
Ms. Patel?
Through you, Chair Green. You mentioned that you consider your leadership style collaborative and distributive. Can you share an example where you've demonstrated that ability?
Sure. During the development of an ESL curriculum, we started to develop an ESL curriculum before DESE came out with theirs, and it was wonderful to see that the DESE curriculum mirrored a lot of the work that we were doing because we used the Understanding by Design framework, and DESE does also. And so during that process, I worked very closely with the person who is now the ELL director. She was she was an administrative teacher. We call them teachers in charge, but she was an administrative teacher. Name is Beth. I have to mention Beth Kirshner. She's lovely. And Beth and I have different ways of thinking and different styles, and we pushed each other. It was a wonderful collaboration because oftentimes she would say to me, well, Michelle, I don't think that's going to work. Why can't we just do this? And then sometimes I would say, you know, Beth, when you ask me why can't we just do this, there is lots of reasons. It usually has a domino effect. And she, okay, we won't do that. And then there would be other times when she would say, I really don't think this is going to work, and this is why. And I would have already made up my mind that this was the thing, and she would spell it out, all the reasons why not. I would then take some time to process it, and I named that. I said, I need time to process that because that really landed on me, in a way that I didn't expect. And so I'd go off and I'd process it, and then I'd come back and say, you know what, you're right, but can we compromise somewhere? And we would, and we did, and we also did that with the educators, with the ESL and the SEI teachers, and we ended up with a product over the course of several years that really mirrors what DESE came up with, and that was phenomenal. But yeah.
Ms. Parrish?
Thank you, Chair. My category is stakeholders, and you've spoken, essentially you've answered the question that I was going to ask, so I'm going to try to sort of follow up on that. You've talked a bit about difficult conversations with staff. Could you talk a bit about some challenging interactions you've had with other stakeholders, parents, students, whomever, and how you've navigated that, what you learned from the process, and how it might shape the way you build relationships in the future?
Absolutely. So when I was hired on July 1st, that was my official start date, at that time, I had 58 families email me that night to let me know that they were very dissatisfied with practices that were taking place at a particular school in Cambridge. And they demanded that I do something about it, and they said that it had been, with the things that were going on for a really long time. At the time, I was not aware of these things, and I found it really strange that 58 people wanted to meet with me on day one. So that in itself was like, wow, I just got here, I just was hired and named, and the next day it was like wild. I met with those families, and I heard some things that I wasn't aware of, B, some of it I did not agree, and C, some of those practices I investigated, and they turned out to be true, unfortunately. And so there was a need to move forward with trying to work with the leadership to change those practices. I was not successful at that. The leadership was not willing to work with me to change the practices, and so a change in leadership had to take place. And it did. I had to send letters to the community to tell them that there were some practices that were normal in their building that they would have to discontinue, and that was not popular either. And I had to say, this is just not good for all kids. The community that was most affected was the African American community and the Jewish community, and LGBTQ+. So those three communities came out, and some Muslims as well came out, and they met with me. And I took my time and I listened well, and it was very challenging, because there were times when we build relationships and understandings with people, and we like them, and then there's some things that take place sometimes that are like, oh no, that just can't happen. We have to work on that. And so, yeah, there was a change in leadership, and now the school is different, very different. The enrollment has changed as well in just a short 2 years. And I've heard that when folks walk into the schools, this was the quote that was shared with me, the walls are now smiling. That's what they say to me. Dr. Madera, the walls in this school are now smiling. And I'm happy, and I'm also sad, because I would have liked to make a difference in the leadership that was there, but sometimes it's just not possible. You're welcome.
Ms. Dion.
All right, my question is about what students need to know. With how quickly the world is changing and technology is progressing, our students will one day be working at jobs that we can't even imagine. How do we prepare our students to be successful in a world that we can't yet envision?
I agree with that. So yes, technology is huge and important. We do need to ensure that our children, our scholars, are learning the newest and the latest in technology. But at the same time, we have to also embed social consciousness, humanity. That's a fear that I have, that we may be going so quickly into the technology that we're losing sight of how we communicate and uphold and support each other. No matter what happens in this world in terms of progress and technology and space, or whatever the thing is, we have to continue to make sure that we're building children that are compassionate, that are that have empathy, understanding, that can get along with others, global understandings, cultural awareness, and lots of compassion, as well as teaching them how to stay current, love learning, ensure that they can access learning on their own when the time comes, that they're no longer in our school district, is very important as well. You're welcome.
Okay. President Ewan-Campen.
My question is about after-school programming. Can you talk about professional experience that you have developing or expanding after-school programming? And if you don't, you can talk about how you would approach the issue in Somerville.
Sure. So I do have some experience with after-school programming, but it's been done through collaborations with community partnerships in Boston. We had partnerships with some of the community folks in like the Hyde Square Task Force in Jamaica Plain, and things like that, where they came in. I am a trustee at the Elliott School for the Arts in Jamaica Plain as well, and they provide after-school art opportunities in the Boston Public Schools, which is lovely. In Cambridge, our after-school programs are predominantly run by DHSP, and they come in and they've done a lot of different things. The King Open, for example, they've extended they've extended the day with some academics and lots of fun activities and projects and things like that. We have a lot of different, like East End houses involved, lots of different partnerships. That's been my experience with it. Oftentimes, it's limited by space, like how much we can actually allow the community to come in and use the building. When I worked at English High School many, many years ago, that school was used like almost all night. Well, not really all night, but you know what I mean, late into the night, because we had after-school programs there. We had classes for adults as well to get their, at the time, GED, now I guess is called HiSET, something like that. ESL and things like that, mathematics and things that they needed. So, yeah. Lots of different experiences, although I've never personally run an after-school program. I've had them in all of the buildings in which I've worked and in the district as well.
Dr. Phillips, your follow-up?
Thanks, through you, Chair. So if you were to come on as our superintendent and after school was an issue that you wanted to take on and you wanted things to be a little more like Cambridge, where the city was providing the vast majority of after school programming in the city and not the public schools, how would you approach the mayor and city council to try to convince them that that might be a better way of doing things?
Okay. So currently, I have to say that we do have a staffing shortage in after-school programs, not just in Cambridge, but Boston as well. And so I would need to understand the landscape of what is possible first to ensure that I'm not just asking to extend participation in a building and have the oversight be inadequate, or ensure that there is capacity to do it well, because for me that's of utmost importance. And so if there is the capacity and the staffing available, yes, I would approach the mayor and say that this is something that our parents need, something that would benefit our children both socially and academically. These partners would be beneficial for it, and identify space and resources as well in order to kick it off well. All things considered, the right conditions and circumstances. Yeah.
All right. On that note, actually, the mayor just reached out to give her apology. She won't be able to make it this evening after all.
Okay.
Sounds like the meeting she's at right now is intense. And so on that note, and on the note of budgets, I'm going to ask Ms. Krebschen to ask the budgeting question in lieu of the mayor.
So you talked about the equity issue of different students coming out of different schools knowing different things. So knowing that, how would you use the budget process to try to address that?
Yes, same answer with the data. Looking at data as what is the story, what are root causes that are causing whatever it is, whatever problem it is that we're trying to fix. Working closely with the finance officer to ensure that we are taking a tiered approach in how we allocate resources, whether that be staff resources or financial, general funds, grants, and the like, and ensuring that we are really focusing in on initiatives that are going to reap the outcomes that we're seeking. That to me is important. Looking at where are the needs, how do we know there's a need, how do we plan an action, what measures would we use, and what are the outcomes, and then adjusting again once we know what the outcomes are. If we have outcomes that are significant, then we want to ensure that we advocate for more of the like. If the outcomes are not significant or not, or the negative outcomes, then that we discontinue. And I know that that's a difficult process. It's really hard to take something away when they're used to having a certain something. However, we have to work together to ensure that we are not continuing to invest in some things that don't reap the outcomes that we need for our students.
Dr. Eichmann, you can have the first follow-up. Sure, I'll ask. All right. So several times so far this evening, you referred to the data
Yes.
and outcomes. This is, as you may not know this, but this is probably one of the more data-heavy school committees you'll ever find. My background is in data, as a data analyst. We have 2 educational policy scholars. So walk us through, like, what is the data you like to use? What are the outcomes you like to track? And if there are data points or outcomes you wish we as a community could do a better job of gathering, what would those be?
So thank you for sharing. I did not know that this was that heavily data-driven team. Happy to hear that. So so the data that I like to track is, of course, standardized data. I know that there are folks out there that absolutely hate the standardized testing for really good reasons. However, when our children, regardless of that, when our children do well on standardized tests, we celebrate and we're happy about it, right? So I look at that. I look at screener data too, just-in-time data, formative assessments, writing assessments. In Cambridge, we also look at SEL screeners and data to see what it is that students need in terms of social emotional competencies and the like. So I don't believe in looking at data just to have an exercise in data. Not everyone loves data. Data doesn't make everybody happy, and it can be really overwhelming. Like, I get that. I've mentioned this during my first interview with you. Data should be a flashlight, not a hammer. And so we want to make sure that we are really shining the light on root causes and what's happening in terms of student achievement, in terms of the social and emotional health of our students. How are they doing in terms of connections with adults, with their peers outside of school, what's happening, so that we can also respond to that as well. We give a teen health survey in Cambridge, and we take it really, really seriously to see who are the groups that are flagged for needs and supports. And so I think that there's a lot of data that we need to consider and look at, but I don't believe in asking for numbers just for the numbers' sake. I think that data should be purposeful and not just an exercise in taking it, looking at it, and then not having a plan afterwards. So we need to look at the data that really informs our practices, our decisions around curriculum, around support staff, around, all types of things. What's happening? Like, I'd be interested in data like how many students identified with special needs have access to the technical and career programs. I was so impressed by them today. But that's a question that I have. Do they have access? Do the English language learners or the multilingual learners, do they have access to those? So those, I like data that will answer a question that is a real pertinent question that helps you inform and plan how you move forward. if that's not the purpose of it, then I don't want to see the data, because we can look at data on everything, and there's, as a researcher, we know that they can come up with a research and data to prove just about anything on either side. And so we need to be really careful around what data we're using and how we're using it, and how, most importantly, like, how are we using it to support our educators to do the best job that they could possibly do.
Thank you. My question is different. So Somerville, we're incredibly fortunate with the resources that are allocated to our students. But Cambridge's budget is probably 35% higher. What? 350%? Oh, right, thank you. There we go, data. Markedly higher. And I would love your thoughts on, while again, our budgets are not tight, or the city is incredibly generous with us, we also can't, we have to be thoughtful in how we spend in ways that, it is my understanding, Cambridge may not have to be as strategic. Can you talk to me about your experiences, having to be strategic with budgets, and how you would address, having been over a decade in a place that is incredibly well-resourced, coming to a place that's just well-resourced?
Got it. So my years in Boston public schools, I had no budget to work with, and we had to do miraculous things and have miraculous outcomes without additional staff or funding or books. And that was a while back. I've been away from Boston now for almost 15 years. I hope that it's different. I pray that it's different. But I have been in situations both personally and professionally where I've had and I have not had. And so when I moved to the Cambridge Public Schools and I saw the libraries there, I kid you not, it brought tears to my eyes. I had to keep it together because I couldn't believe the natural light and the sun, the selection of books and the green spaces and the gardens that were growing there. And I hurt for my students in Boston who deserved just as much as everybody else. Being from a district that is well-resourced sometimes worries me, because the more resources you have, the less resourceful you can become. And so that in itself can be something that really needs to be taken into account, because we can't approach every problem to add more people and add more money. That has been proven to not work. And so to answer your question honestly, I would look at what's not working and what have we continued that needs to discontinue in order to bring in what's needed. And so I am not spoiled with the budget in Cambridge. I do realize that it's abundant, and that's a blessing, but it's also a curse.
Ms. Patone?
Through you, Chair Green. First, I want to thank Dr. Ackman for that excellent question. I basically scribbled on my paper. Not that I'm taking credit. She did a better job than I would. But I do want to ask a little more of a technical question about budgeting. Mm-hmm. Can you share your experience with budgeting, either at a district level or at a school level or a department level, so we just have a better understanding of your experience?
Sure. So I've had experience at all of those levels: school level, district level, large budget in Cambridge. I lean on the finance officer, who is amazing in Cambridge, and I've also worked very closely with the grants writer and manager. I've learned a lot from her throughout the years around ensuring that things are balanced, that the budget is balanced, that I'm using the correct codes, that I'm purchasing the right materials. I do make decisions every day around supplementing the different curriculum departments for purchases to support their PD, to support trainings and resources. Right now, we've embedded on ensuring that teachers are all trained in the science of reading. And we've sent so many educators for that professional learning, as well as some principals as well have gone, and coaches. We've training all the coaches as well. And so that is something that I have supported with budgeting from our department. We've also embarked in a new rollout for math. We're going to adopt illustrative math across the entire district, and that's also costly. Also supporting a new purchase of textbooks for social studies. And so there, a lot of decisions are made. I have to be very careful around how I use the funds and ensure that I'm being equitable in it, and that the decisions made are going to benefit our teachers very well, and that benefit trickles to our students. And so I do manage an enormously large budget. And I say enormously large because I didn't have one in Boston. And so to me, it's large. And I do have help, and I use it. I had a secretary who's now moved on to become a college professor and get her doctorate. And so I had her up until like last month, and just doing constant check-ins. Where are we? What's been encumbered? What is left? What initiatives? And planning the year that's coming to ensure that we're supporting the appropriate rollout and supports of initiatives as we move forward. Did I answer the question?
Through you, Chair Green. Partially, in terms of managing a budget, I think also I'd like to know more about creating a budget and part of developing a budget.
Developing a budget. Okay, so we have a certain amount of what we call buckets of funds, and so every year we do meet with our finance manager, and we strategize and think about what do we need moving forward? How much do we need for summer programs, for example, because that's something that I also oversee, the summer programs in Cambridge, and planning for that. If we want to align buses, for example, to ensure that there's money for buses for field trips, but that there's also money to transport kids across the city so that they can benefit from a summer program that aligns to their needs. So pre-planning for that, pre-planning for materials, pre-planning for professional learning for our teachers in support of the curriculum that's being rolled out. So there's a lot of pre-planning and creating the spreadsheet in such a way that we know exactly how much is available, what has been allocated, for what purpose, and then having a little bit left over. A little bit is a lot, a few thousand left over for incidentals and things that we may not have thought of, because you have to be able to move and manage. And sometimes we do budget transfers as well. We think that something's going to take place and really hit off. hit it off, and for some reason, something happens, and I'm able to then allocate that to the need that we did not anticipate for. And so that's how we do it.
Okay, I think that ends round one of our interview. So now I will allow members to ask whatever question they may have in their mind, with the knowledge that we will go one at a time. Ms. Dion.
One of our long-term goals as a district is to hire and retain more educators of color. Some of the folks I've spoken with in Cambridge have mentioned that many educators of color have left and taken jobs in other districts in recent years. Can you give some examples of how you've supported educators of color and how you would work to retain educators of color in Somerville?
Sure. So one of the reasons we have lost educators of color in Cambridge is their challenges with the MTEL. That's been huge. And so we have created opportunities for them to take courses, access courses to become licensed, because licensure is really hard. I've taken the MTEL myself a couple of times just to learn where the difficulties lie and to create opportunities with staff members to offer support in being able to plan for and pass the MTEL. And so that's happening.
For the audience, would you?
MTEL. The MTEL is the Massachusetts Teacher Licensure Test. Sorry about the acronyms, yeah. So you have to take this test in order to get licensed through the Department of Ed. And that is a huge barrier for our teachers, not just teachers of color, but predominantly teachers of color. So that's one way. We've also worked to create pathways for our paraprofessionals. The majority of our paraprofessionals are people of color from different countries all over the world, very global. And so we've created pathways for those individuals to become licensed teachers as well. Some of those paraprofessionals were teachers in their homeland. And because the education system is different in different countries, sometimes it's not honored here, or it may be a matter of just having to take 2 or 3 or maybe 4 classes and then meet the requirements needed to become licensed and be able to work. I've also kind of homegrown some teachers. I've plucked teachers from Northeastern University when I gave classes there. There were people that I did approach and say, hey, have you ever considered, and brought them in, either as a tutor at first and then just kind of employ them through opportunities to tutor or be paraprofessionals in the classroom while they earn their credentials. We also have a teacher prep pathway as well in collaboration with Lesley University, where teachers are able to continue to work, receive some discounted opportunities to take courses, and become educators as well. Yes. Did I answer the full question? Yes. Okay. You think so? Okay.
Going once? All right, well, I have a question. So in honor of it being MCAS season, and you're mentioning it as a data point you look to, would you speak to what limits, if any, you see in MCAS and the data it gives us, and how would you like to supplement it if you were able to do so?
Yeah. So what limits exist in the MCAS? Well, there is an effort for it to be culturally responsive, But every now and then, something does slip in there that is not culturally responsive or confusing for students that may not be from the dominant mainstream. So that there's a limitation there. Sometimes MCAS does not align with the scope and sequence in which we teach certain curriculum. And so if something is taught very early in the year that is of importance and it doesn't get revisited again, when March rolls around, there's some learning loss or some memory loss around topics that are taught earlier on. And so that could create a disadvantage. One of the things that I am very happy that has shifted with MCAS is that they're now including growth measures. And I feel that looking at growth, it speaks more to me than the actual proficiency or not meeting expectations or meeting expectations. So I'm really happy that is something that is now included and considered. And I looked at Somerville Public Schools, and I see that lots of growth was made in 2022 versus pre-pandemic. And so that was exciting to see that a lot of the schools are, either reaching 50 or have passed 50 for growth measures. That's excellent.
Ms. Patone?
Thank you, through you, Chair Green. Can you share a professional experience where you disappointed yourself or disappointed others? What was the outcome? What did you learn? And how did you change your professional practice?
I guess I would have to share the same situation that I shared during my first interview, because that was my greatest learning. It was when I was working in the Boston Public Schools and leading a school that had an advanced work program and not understanding the processes that took place with the testing and selection of students for advanced placement classes. The advanced placement classes are designed, they are designed to provide students with a rigorous, high-quality curriculum and learning experience in preparing them for the exam schools in Boston. During that time, I was very green. It was my first year as a principal. The 20 students that I had were all Caucasian, and the rest of the school was kids of color. And so what I did was I doubled up the advanced placement course, and instead of 20 kids, I opened it up to 20 more kids from the school. The teachers selected them according to their standard, Stanford 9, I believe, was the measure at the time. And they gave me these 20 more kids, and I put 10 and 10 kids of color in each. The year went on. No one told me I was doing anything wrong. I moved forward with it, and towards the end of the year, it was brought to my attention that was an issue that was not to take place again, despite the fact that all 40 students, the 20 that came from within the school and the 20 that tested in, they all made it into exam schools. And so what I learned from that was, A, really do your homework and understand that there are politics and policies and procedures that you need to know, and that sometimes we can't just, how they say, why can't we just do something? Well, that was my number one experience with understanding why we can't just do something. I also learned that if you give children a high quality learning experience coupled with a very highly trained teacher, prepared teacher, they will rise to those high expectations. And that sometimes our families don't have the knowledge and access to really go forth and get in front of the line and access opportunities that are not known to them. And so that was also very eye-opening for me. And yeah, I had a lot of learnings from that, a lot of understandings that came from it. Good, both, you know, they were good and good, because it is, when you make a mistake, you have to be able to make a mistake and own it forever, right? You have to own it forever. But you have to learn from it. With every mistake, there's an opportunity to expand your knowledge base and understanding of systems. And it really propelled me to really advocate for high-quality curriculum, high-quality instruction, really empowering teachers with strategies and professional learning, because that's where it's at. If all of our kids have access to that, then we're really being equitable. You're welcome.
Description.
Thanks. Looking through your resume, it feels like you have done a wide range of, I know you were a high school principal and now you're the elementary education assistant superintendent. So, and that's relatively unusual. Typically an educator sort of picks an age and sticks with it. So I just wondered if you could sort of speak to how that came to be and what you've learned from being able to have this sort of wide range.
Sure. I'm not sure if I shared, but I've been an educator in elementary, middle, and high. And so I've never felt like I needed to be in a particular grade or role to be an excellent educator. I'm not a grade, I'm a teacher, or I'm not a grade, I'm an administrator. And I do believe in learning what our kids need before they come to us, while they're with us, and when they're in a higher grade or beyond school, right? College and career. And so I'm a learner at heart. I love a challenge. I think it made me versatile and well-rounded in terms of education. It gives me a level of authenticity when I work with educators, that I have this background. I love all students, all scholars, all grades. And I've also taught graduate school. And so for me, teaching is it's my passion, teaching and learning, and ensuring that I create conditions for that to happen well is my purpose. It's been my purpose for the past 3 decades. And I've always felt like if you're well-skilled, there is nothing you can't teach. And so, yeah. You're right. It's people usually stay in one lane. I don't stay in my lane.
If no one else has a first question, we'll move on to round 2.
Through you, Chair Green. Share how you would describe the role of the superintendent in Somerville and the success factors, specifically in context of what you've learned about the Somerville community throughout this process. And what support do you imagine you might need to be successful?
Sure, thank you. How do I imagine the role of superintendent here? So I've only spent 1 day here, so let's name that. And I do have some noticings and wonderings about curriculum and about instruction, and I have some wonderings around how staff is allocated and utilized to leverage achievement. So I do have some questions around that. I won't name them here because I don't want to give other people the benefit of having those questions in their interviews. So I'm going to be strategic and just kind of hold back on that for a moment. What supports would I need? I would definitely need support from everyone to understand the school committee configuration is different from what I'm accustomed to. The way that staff is utilized is a little different as well. I need to understand what initiatives have taken place that have been successful and what have we tried that didn't work out. What did we try that we let go of that we shouldn't have? Because that's also something. I would definitely lean a little bit on Dr. Curley to understand his learnings and his experiences and advice, what their challenges are, because they are the receivers of everyone who comes in through the front door. They're on the front lines. The principals, I've already asked them, what are some things that you have hopes and dreams for your schools? What are some things that are currently barriers to allowing you to achieve those things that you want to do in your schools but have not been able to? What's in the way? What are some ideas that have floated around for a really long time and have not come to fruition, and why? So yes, I would need, I have a lot of questions, and I would lean on the community to help me to understand. I'd want to hear from parents around what their hopes and dreams are for the Somerville Public Schools under a different leadership. And I also would like to understand ways in which I can be leveraged to help this school district really move forward, continue to move forward in a positive way. So I need everybody's help. Yeah, because this is new. It's going to be brand new for me. And to come in and thinking that I know exactly what I'm going to do, it just doesn't, it's just not my style right now. You know, it's not my style to do that. Come in with a bunch of assumptions. I'm coming in with a bunch of wonderings and some questions. Sure.
Actually, relatedly, it is seemingly impossible for any one person to excel at all of the things a superintendent is responsible for. With that in mind, from your current perspective, what are the places you think would be growth opportunities, and what are the things relatedly you think would be places where I'm gonna be looking for others to support me in this area?
Growth opportunities for myself? Oh, there's always room for growth. I want to grow in understanding of the practices that have been here. I want to understand clearly what the culture is of every school has its own culture and its own way of operating. Understand that. There would be opportunities for me to grow in the sense of I would now be sitting with school committee and the mayor. That's different. And understanding that I will have a level of political influence that I may not have had before, and ensuring that I am understanding how that influence may be used and how it may not be used. So there's a lot. There's a learning curve. There will be a learning curve. I acknowledge that. But I'm a learner, and I'm a reader, and I'm going to get cliche. So leaders are readers. And so we have to make sure that I'm continuously growing. Would love for people to approach me if there is an area that I need to pay more attention to, and just call it out with love, and say, hey, Michelle, you know, like, this is an area that I need you to have eyes on or learn more about, and be open to receive that from members. Yeah. And what was the rest of the question? I'm a little tired.
Sure. And similarly, what parts of the job are the parts where you think you'll probably have to lean on staff more because they're not necessarily strengths of yours?
Yes, okay. So, not necessarily strengths of mine. Not sure that I can phrase it that way, but I would say that together we're better, and just I would need thought partners because I don't know what those growth areas are yet. But when I approach them, I do need people that I can rely on and trust to be thought partners and really like openly discuss and consider different perspectives on how to approach a problem of practice or an area that is beginning to sizzle before it boils. And so I want to be able to have the relationship to either receive that before I'm aware of it, and when I'm aware of it, be confident enough to be able to say, I need help here. What are your thoughts? What are your experiences? I appreciate people with institutional knowledge and historical background. I know who to go to in Cambridge if I need a synthesizer. That someone who can synthesize all the information, everything that everyone said, or everything that has already taken place prior to me, and even when during my own tenure there or here. And so, yes, there's a lot to consider and to work with. I just hope that I'm received openly so that I can have this reciprocal dialogue with people around things that I may not be aware of or need to learn on this job.
Ms. Barish.
Thank you. You mentioned that you've spoken with some principals today about barriers. One of the challenges that we're facing right now is some of our buildings need help. Do you have any experience with opening new buildings or renovating buildings, experience with the MSBA that would be relevant here? Or is that potentially an area that Chair Green was just referring to where you might need extra support?
Yes. So it's yes and yes. So yes, and yes. I have some experience. I've worked very closely with Jim Maloney. He was the chief operating officer in the Cambridge Public Schools for many years. He just retired less than a year ago. And I worked with him on, understanding the different phases of capital projects. The King School, the King Open, and now the Tobin is under reconstruction. I've worked with principals that have had to, multiple principals that have had to pack up and move to a swing space, and start a new school in a building that wasn't theirs, and make it work and make it warm and welcoming, which is hard. So I've seen that happen and have transitioned with the principals through those processes several times in Cambridge. Worked with the architects and been involved in the design, just giving feedback on the design and working with students on understanding what their perceived needs would be in designing the schools for a future. So that's been my level of involvement with it. And it's stressful, and it's expensive, and it's disruptive. However, at the end of the day, when you end up with a new building, it's wonderful. And then you notice that there were some design challenges that weren't anticipated. Like it's either too hot or too cold, or the solar panels heat up one side of the building versus another side of the building. And so, you try to think of everything in the process, all hands on deck, all brains on deck. and then you go, oh, we didn't anticipate this particular design challenge.
Ms. Dion?
You had mentioned previously the development of Cambridge's Universal Pre-K program. Describe your role in helping to create this program and explain what steps you think would need to be taken if we wanted to implement a similar program here in Somerville.
Wow. So I've been very fortunate that I've worked closely with Dr. Lisa Grant, who is incredible. So hiring the right staff with the right background is critical. So I work collaboratively with Lisa on the UPK. She initially started off as being a representative and being both supervised and evaluated by both the City of Cambridge and the Cambridge Public Schools under me. And slowly as the project has developed and is now in more than halfway through the planning process, she's representing more city side now than Cambridge Public Schools. So lots of questions, lots of planning and thinking and strategizing, ensuring that city officials were on board, and they were, which was fabulous to have that consensus that this is something that we wanted to have, a mixed delivery model. And I need to say what that is because that's still very confusing. So mixed delivery model doesn't mean that the Cambridge Public Schools are taking over all UPK. It means that we're honoring the early childhood centers that exist in the city of Cambridge and just kind of aligning our quality, our quality programming, the standards that the students, how we assess them, and just having some alignment and having some seats that are for universal pre-K, meaning that they're free. And so we are now looking at a common assessment to assess program effectiveness and quality across the mixed delivery system. So if we were to do something like this in Cambridge, I think that collaboration is key between the public schools and the city. Planning needs to be done collaboratively. The appropriate stakeholders need to be at the table in terms of, our early childhood experts are huge. Our next steps is also to determine how we decide the allocation of human resources. We have teachers that are on our district side that are union members and honor all the expectations around their pay, their benefits, and the like. We are not able to do that for the city side of it. And so it's been really interesting because as the planning and the development has moved forward, it's unearthed some reasons why it didn't happen sooner. Like we didn't have that understanding and now we do. Like our entry age had to be adjusted across the board. We do have to split JK and K classes, which is something that I've wanted for 14 years, but it's finally going to happen. Our 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds are not, in the same developmental stage, and they have different cognitive and social needs. And so that's taking place. And looking at our enrollment, how we enroll students in the schools is going to shift as well. And so it's a lot more complicated than we thought initially, but having gone through this process alongside with Dr. Grant and having the experience, I can transfer that over to Somerville should Somerville decide that this is a beneficial next step for the district and the city. You're welcome.
Just as a point of information, Somerville also adopted a mixed delivery system for pre-K.
We do have one here. Beautiful.
Any other questions? Ms. Patone?
Through you, Chair Green. I'm trying to get a better understanding of what kind of experience that you've had with leading teams. So one of the big roles of a superintendent is this incredibly experienced and thoughtful cabinet and executive leadership team. And I know as an assistant superintendent, you may not have had that scope of responsibility, but if you can share an experience where you've had to lead or organize a high-functioning team and some more details about like how many people, what kind of roles they had, that would be super helpful. Thanks.
Sure. So my most recent is the principal teams, the team of principals that I work with. How do you develop a high-functioning team? I believe it has to be done with respect and with honor, honoring the strengths that everyone on the team brings. I believe in teams developing authentically through the work. When you are together and you have an understanding, a passion and purpose that is common, and you're working towards that, and everyone brings their different perspectives to the table, I believe that is a way in which we become more high-functioning and more successful. And we've been able to do that through my work with principals. We are now at a point where principals acknowledge that someone has a particular strength in one building versus another. There is trust. They go on learning walks together, and I'm with them or without them around a common theme, whether that be like the development of an MTSS process, whether it be trying to find ways to integrate sheltered English programs with Gen Ed more, or whether it be around how do we create, one of the schools, King Open calls them small learning communities for the population with autism spectrum disorder. So we, rather than call them ASD, they call them our small learning communities. And the small learning communities do have opportunities to learn alongside their Gen Ed peers for times during the day. And that kind of teaming came from a lot of leadership and a lot of leadership moves, but also trusting the intelligence and the capacity of, and also providing some opportunities and some leading people to each other so that they can work together for a common goal, for addressing problems of practice or just for their own development. Someone is doing something phenomenal over here. Hey, let's go see it. We can see it together. And we're now at a point where that can take place with or without me. Yeah. I don't need to micromanage it. Yeah.
Last call. Going once. Going twice. All right, well, I'll give you the last word. Do you have any last things you want to say to us before we adjourn this meeting?
I've had a wonderful day. It's been very, very long. However, I couldn't think of a better way to approach the interview process. I got a chance to approach it with some knowledge of what actually takes place inside the schools. I got to visit classrooms. I got to interact with lots of different staff members. I want to thank you all for being kind and for offering me this opportunity and bringing me to this level of the process. I'm very happy about that. I'm also happy for the tough questions that were asked and transparent and given me a chance to address them. That was very well appreciated. I'm excited. I like what I saw. And I also saw opportunities for work that's meaningful and can have a significant impact. And I would love to bring that to the Somerville Public Schools if you'll have me. Yeah, I would be really happy to do that. So I want to thank you. I know you all are very tired. And just thank you, and I'm humbled by this experience.
Thank you. With no further business before this body, we are adjourned. See everyone tomorrow.
Thank you, thank you. Okay. Yes, because if you have me roaming, I may be roaming for hours.
It's that way. Just walk back.
Is that way? No.
Emily lives right next to where
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
So,
And Emily